All right, today we're tackling something that is totally changing the game for our mobile world. It's called OpenRAN. And honestly, the best way to think about it is it's like the PC revolution finally coming to the massive networks that run our phones. So let's kick this off with a pretty simple question, right? When you build a computer, you can grab a processor from one company, a graphics card from another, a motherboard from a third, and somehow it all just works together. So why on earth haven't we been able to do that for the cell towers that connect pretty much everything in our lives? Well, that's exactly the problem OpenRAN is here to fix. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we need to understand the old closed network problem. Then, we'll get into the big idea behind OpenRAN, check out its new super smart brain, see how it's actually being used out in the wild, and finally, wrap up with why any of this should matter to you. All right, first things first. Before we can really appreciate the solution, we've got to understand the problem. You see, for decades, mobile networks were built in this really specific, really walled-off way. I like to call it the era of the black box. So picture this. You're a mobile operator, and you need to build a new cell tower. For the longest time, you couldn't just shop around for the best parts. Nope. You had to go to one of a tiny handful of massive vendors and buy their all-in-one giant black box. Now sure, maybe it was simple. One company to deal with, one number to call if something broke. But the trade-off, it was massive. Everything, the hardware, the software, was completely locked together, fused into one single package. And this black box approach, it created some major headaches. First off, you had vendor lock-in. Operators were basically stuck with one supplier for the entire life of that equipment. And with no real competition, guess what happened to prices? They stayed sky high. Innovation was just as bad. It only happened when the big vendor decided it was time, not when the market needed it. And trying to customize or tweak your own network? Forget about it. It was practically impossible. Okay, so now that we're all on the same page about that black box problem, let's talk about the solution. Enter OpenRAN. The big idea here is so simple, but it's totally revolutionary. It's time to break open the box. So at its heart, OpenRAN isn't really a thing you can buy. It's more of a new philosophy, a new way of building networks. The whole idea is to create open, standardized interfaces. Think of them as common plugs between all the different pieces of a cell tower. And this means that for the first time, network operators can finally mix and match hardware and software from any company they want. Yeah, just like building a PC. Okay, the first huge concept we need to get is something called disaggregation. I know, it sounds super technical, but all it really means is pulling the hardware and the software apart. They used to be totally fused together, remember? Now, the software that actually runs the network can live on just regular off-the-shelf servers, completely separate from the specialized radio gear. And this is what that actually looks like. Don't get bogged down in the acronyms. The main point is right there. That one big box is now broken up into these separate, interoperable pieces. You've got the radio unit, the ORU. That's the part that actually talks to your phone. And then you have the brains of the operation, the ODU and OCU, which are now just software that can run on normal computer hardware. They've been separated. That's the magic trick. But wait a minute. How do you get a radio from company A to actually talk to software from company B? Well, that's where the second big idea comes into play, open interfaces. These are basically the standardized rule books for communication. It's the common language that all these different parts agree to speak. The USB analogy is perfect here. It's like creating a USB standard for the entire mobile network, so you know that no matter who makes the parts, they're all going to plug in and work together. So, once you've broken open the box and all the parts can talk to each other, something brand new becomes possible. We can finally give the network a programmatical brain. And this right here is where OpenRAN gets seriously powerful. Let's talk about the RAN Intelligent Controller, or the RIC. Think of the RAC as the operating system for the radio network, kind of like iOS or Android for your phone. It's a software platform that sits on top of all the hardware, and its job is to collect data, and this is the big part, allow developers to use things like AI and machine learning to actively control and optimize the network's performance in real time. We're talking second-by-second adjustments. Now, this brain actually has two parts that work together. First, you've got the near real-time RIC. Think of this as the network's reflexes, making super fast decisions in less than a second. Then you have the non-real-time RIC. This is more like the team's head coach, the long-term strategist. It sits back in the cloud, looks at all the big picture data, and then sends down the master plan and the smarts for the network to use. So, if the RIC is the operating system, what runs on it? You guessed it,
apps. Specifically, we call them X apps for the fast real-time stuff and R apps for the strategic big picture stuff. And let me tell you, this is an absolute game changer. It means the network is no longer this static, fixed thing. You can literally expand what it can do by adding new software, just like downloading a new app on your smartphone.
So what kind of stuff can these network apps actually do? Well, the possibilities are pretty amazing. You could have an app that's designed to see a huge crowd gathering for a concert and instantly reconfigure the network to handle that massive data load. Or how about an app that intelligently powers down parts of the network late at night to save a ton of energy? You could have others that improve your video streaming, dynamically share resources, or even use AI to spot and stop security threats as they happen. Okay, I know what you might be thinking. This all sounds great on paper, but is anyone actually doing this? And the answer is a big yes. OpenRAN is moving way past the cool idea phase and into a real-world global movement. So let's take a look at how it's being rolled out.
And this isn't some chaotic free-for-all. You've got these huge global groups like the ORAN Alliance and the Telecom Infra Project bringing hundreds of different companies to the table. We're talking operators, hardware vendors, software giants, all working together to hammer out the common standards that make this whole open ecosystem actually work.
And if you want a really great example of this in action, just look at Brazil. They've launched a whole national program around this. And they're not just buying OpenRAN gear. They're trying to build their own entire ecosystem from the ground up, developing hardware, writing software, and even training their own local experts.
And they've got this really smart step-by-step plan. In phase 1, they're focused on nailing down the software and the control parts, the brains of the operation. Then, in phase 2, they're actually going to develop their own 5G radio unit, the hardware, and start creating those clever network apps. And finally, phase 3 is all about rolling this stuff out to help key industries like healthcare and manufacturing all across the country. Okay, so we've talked about what OpenRAN is and how it works. But now we get to the most important question of all. Why? Why does any of this matter? What's the payoff for everyone involved? Well, when you boil it all down, it's pretty clear. First, you get way more competition, which helps break up that old monopoly and bring down costs. Second, you get this explosion of innovation, because now anyone from a tiny startup to a university research lab can create new features for the network. And all of that together leads to the thing we all care about: better, more powerful, and way more flexible 5G networks for all of us. And this quote really says it all, doesn't it? This approach allows the creation of a more competitive and vibrant ecosystem. That's the key. It's not just about swapping out one piece of tech for another. It's about opening up a world that was closed for way too long, letting in fresh ideas and new players to build the future. So I'll leave you with this final thought. For decades, the amazing innovation we've seen in computing and on the internet has been built on open, programmable platforms. Now, that same openness is finally coming to the very networks that connect us. And that raises a really exciting question. If our mobile networks become as open and creative as our computers, what are we going to build next?